what's that Leonard Cohen line? There's a crack in everything. That's where the light gets in. It's definitely true. Okay, yeah. My name is Michael C. Smith, and I'm a father of two, husband, and started trying to be very serious about songwriting and performing in about 2005, and just did as much as I can. Live in Decatur. Those sorts of things. I think one of the luxuries of being a songwriter, as a person, I tend to be pretty outgoing, usually, and pretty seemingly happy-go-lucky in most circumstances. And then the bulk of my songs are the opposite of that. They tend to deal with pretty weighty subjects, and that's fantastic. That's how I've come to work those things out. On my best days, I get up early, get up about an hour before the rest of the family, go back to the music room in the back of the house, and from there, I'll begin the day with a cup of coffee and prayer. Sometimes read, reflect on whatever I'm reading. Try to take some time. There's two different ways to. I'm sure you know this. There's a couple different ways to read. You can just read and consume and move on, or you can read a little bit and stop and really absorb it and think. And if I give myself time to read and stop and absorb and think, then that can set the mood right for the day. And then usually, if I can do that, if I can have that hour to myself, I try to divide it. Like the first half hour is the coffee and the prayer and the reading, and the second half hour I play guitar, which is obviously one of my favorite things to do. Yeah, there is not a role that I've had yet that I love more than being dad. Yeah, it is awesome, absolutely awesome. And that's something too. I'm glad you're doing these videos. There's something in being a father, or at least for me. Any of the things that I had coming into being a parent that I don't want to pass on, I became very aware of pretty early on in the process, and started trying to kill, or sort out or figure out so that my kids don't have that thing. I don't know if you've heard of the term generational curses. Are you familiar with that? Mm-mm. It's a biblical term, and the idea is that we inherit the sins of our father or the sins of our mother, and that we then pass them on, and we pass them on from generation to generation. And it's not like, the idea is not that God, commands that you have these things ingrained in you. It's not you're cursed with it forever. The idea is that you have to come to understand it, and it's up to us if we break them. So things that maybe my grandfather had hang-ups about, that maybe my mom or dad had hang-ups about, that I recognized in myself. Around the time I started having kids, I started to pick those things out. My wife and I, we kind of sat down and began sorting them out ourselves, and we're like, man, I'm not putting this into, we've got to stop this. They're not going to see this part of me. I'm going to make sure that behavior doesn't get ingrained in them. And that's how you break those things. Yeah. A lot of the things that I found that I had to start talking about and working on and admitting to were really just kind of hang-ups with confidence. And I had a lot of insecurities that kind of were passed down. I think I mentioned I don't really want to talk too much about some of my family members, but some of the things that I inherited from them. Particularly on my mother's side, there's a huge sense of unworthiness, and a huge sense of this is the world, and here we are, and we'll always just be this thing that kind of exists, maybe just outside of everybody else, and that's a really bad hang-up to have, and around the time I started having kids, I realized that I couldn't give that to them. I wanted them to be secure. I wanted them to have confidence, and to know that they could move forward and with their heads up in some kind of a way that made sense to them, and that their ideas weren't just garbage on any level. And so I had a lot of that going into it, and And a lot of it comes from this particular point in my family's history that there's a photograph of, actually. Or at least there's a photograph that can kind of represent it to me. And I'll send you a link if you want to put it up. But there's this picture of my mother's father, my grandfather, and his wife, and my aunt, actually. When I first saw the picture, I thought it was my mother, but it turned out to be my aunt. But anyways, the little family, they're standing in a creek, and I think it's in Ohio. There's a trailer behind them, and you can really see all these stories and all these kind of hang-ups and these addictions and these kind of toxic ideas that have been so pervasive along my family line and have splintered off into all these different things with myself and my brothers and just really everybody that we've been involved with, and into my wife and our relationship as well. I don't know, I can see all that when I look at the picture, So I was looking at it one day, and I wrote this song. This is really a song about my grandmother and my grandfather and my mother. So first verse is grandfather, second verse is grandmother, third verse is my mother. And I don't know, I'll play it for you if I can. Yeah, so anyways, this is called Troubled Wind. Your ankle deep in muddy water, a cigarette in your hand. Faith can't reconcile all these sins at your command. Your wife beside you, your little girl in the mud. The distance in your eyes won't be covered up by this blood. All those things you can't rise above grow like weeds beside you in the flood. Your faith carved through in part, regret in part, fear, like all those things that keep you here. On this troubled wind. With her eyes dark and suspicious, afraid of everything that came her way. A little summer skirt and a shirt she would never change. She'd peddle prayers for a redemption she could not bring herself to trust. At night she kept her bed in ashes and rust. All those things you can't rise above grow like weeds beside you in the flood. Your face carved through in part, regret in part, fear, like all those things that keep you here. On this troubled wind. On this troubled wind. Well, you little darling, if I could I'd carry you away. I'd walk right into your past and over you I'd pray. Yeah, but time is our master, it ain't the other way around. His trembling hands can't resurrect things left in the ground. All those things you can't rise above grow like weeds beside you in the flood. Your faith carved through in part, regret in part, fear, like all those things that keep you here. On this troubled wind, on this troubled wind. Yeah, on this troubled wind. Don't be afraid. Talk about it. Find somebody that will listen. Anything that you feel is valid. Anything that you are afraid of, it's okay to be afraid of it, okay? But it's also okay to face it. And I would say, and this is not my quote, this is actually from Fred Rogers, but if it's human, anything that's human is mentionable. And once you mention it, then it's approachable and it's beatable. That's what I would say.